as we've been looking at the ideas around pathways to soulful living. And today I want to talk to you about the idea of a life not wasted. A life not wasted. Say that with me. A life not wasted. A life not wasted. I believe with all my heart and soul that each and every one of us is here by divine appointment. That we are, and I don't just mean in this room, but I mean on the planet at this point in time, that we are here by divine appointment. We're not an accident. We're meant to be here, and we are meant to contribute while we are here. We are meant to make a difference while we are here. And the difference that we make is very much tied to our natural inclinations, the things that we come by easily and naturally, where we are born, the opportunities that we have, all kind of mold and shape how that divine appointment unfolds for us and how we live out this idea of a fulfilled life, not a wasted life. I believe that one of the most important jobs that we have in our life is coming to clarity around why are we here? What is our purpose? What is unique about us that allows us to be a positive influence, to make a difference? Why are we here with the opportunities that we have as well as the challenges that we have? Because all of that goes into the answering of that question. You may be familiar with the work of Simon Sinek. He is a British American who is known for some of his writings, his organizational work, his motivational speaking. Perhaps the best known book that he wrote is Start With Why. It was a global bestseller. Start with why. And his whole focus is on this idea that when each of us understands our why for being here, our why for living, then everything in our life works so much better. And that's very much at the heart of unity, of our spiritual teachings as well. It is what is beneath the idea that we are here by divine appointment, that we have something that we are meant to do and be and to express. And so Sinek talks about the importance of understanding your why. Why are you here? What is the ultimate good that you are meant to do? And how will you go about doing that? But too often what we do is we approach it from the opposite direction. Instead of starting with why, we start with how are we going to do it and what are we going to do? And that gets us pretty messed up. It gets us often on the wrong path. It is so important for us to be clear why, what motivates us, what's really important to us. And so I want to give you a few pointers that will either help you discover that if you haven't already, and if you feel like you have discovered it, it will help you make sure that you're staying on track with it. So the very first is this, to really practice tuning out the negative voices and turning up the volume on your unique calling. So it's practicing tuning out the negative voices. Do any of you still have negative voices in your life? It could be well-meaning family or friends, and sometimes the negative voices come out of a motivation that the person really cares about you, and out of their own sense of what they believe is possible. They may have concern about what you are here to do, and so in their attempt to help you, they may be that negative voice. Nod your head if you've ever been on the receiving end of that. The practice is being able to tune out that negative input and really raise the volume on understanding your unique calling, your unique calling. The only book I ever wrote is a book that helps us get pointed in the right direction. The name of the book is Ask Yourself This. You can get it free. It's not even available for sale anymore, but you can get it for free. And it's a book, very short book, but it's a book of questions, deep, soul-provoking questions that if you take the time to answer them for yourselves, you will find you're able to craft a life of much greater meaning and purpose. The questions themselves will lead you into a place of knowingness. And yet for so many of us, we have been raised first and foremost to get the right answer. Well, the right answer depends a heck of a lot on what is the question you're asking. And in spiritual growth, the deeper questions, the philosophical questions, the purpose-driven questions are the kinds of questions that are so important for us to ask. And when we begin to ask them and we stay with them until we get a sense of the rightness about whatever answer comes forward, if we will stay with them, we will begin to find our way. And our way, we will also begin to find that the doors of opportunity open before us. The doors of opportunity open before us. So turning down the negative input, this is also why meditation is so important. It helps us to be able to filter out that outside chatter so we can get clarity around what is really coming up and through us on a soul level. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? The second leads right to this, and it's paying attention to your soul. Paying attention to your soul, slowing your life down periodically so you can be available to the insight, to the wisdom, to the guidance of your soul. To pay attention to those moments when you seem to lose all sense of time in yourself. If you've had those moments where you seem to lose all sense of time in yourself, it is likely because you are living out in alignment with your soul's deepest purpose. How many of you are familiar with the work of Joseph Campbell in his book, The Power of Myth? He spent a lifetime studying religions and studying human stories and mythologies, trying to help people come to an understanding of the meaning of life. And yet one of the things that he came to that I think is so powerful is he said that we are not so much looking for the meaning of life as we are looking for the experience of being alive. Take that in for a moment. That's powerful. Not so much looking for the meaning of life, but looking for the experience of being alive. Take just a moment to check in with yourself. When are those times that you really feel the experience of being alive? Not just going through the motions. It's pretty amazing how much of our hours and days we can spend on autopilot. Thinking the same thoughts we thought yesterday, last week, last year, doing the same things in the same way that we did yesterday, last week, last year. There's a certain efficiency to some of that, but it isn't always effective. It isn't always effective. Checking in and asking when and where and how is it that I begin to lose myself, all sense of time. And Campbell talks about it as bliss, just really feeling in alignment with who and what we really are. The more we can zero in on identifying what that is for us, the healthier and happier and better everything in our life is going to be. The beauty and the richness of it to me is what is true for me about that is probably not the same answer for you. And that's a good thing. That's part of what creates this wonderful tapestry and richness of the human experience and diversity, that we are not all exactly the same, even though a lot of times we try to make the other person just like us because then we think it'd be easy to live with them. Did you follow all that? Right? And yet it is the richness and the diversity that is really, really needed. And so being able to really listen to the wisdom of your soul, and that does require certain kinds of practices that allow us to be present to listen. Have you ever taken a music appreciation course or ever really practiced attentively listening to a complex, beautiful piece of music, particularly like a classical piece of music, where you try to pull out or pay attention to just one instrument? That's the kind of thing that I'm talking about here, being able to really zero in, being able to really listen, being able to really be present to what is evolving and moving at the very heart and soul of you, that deep listening. Some of you may be familiar with the novelist and very successful author, Susan Monk Kidd. Her book, The Secret Life of Bees, I did not read it, but I've certainly heard a lot about it. And her book, The Secret Life of Bees, was on a New York Times bestseller list for over 100 weeks. Over 100 weeks. She sold more than 6 million copies of that book just in the U.S. I probably should read it. I just don't do a lot of novel reading or listening. But the reason I bring up her is she tells a story about having visited the island of Crete, and having visited a very old Orthodox convent. And while she was there, it was still an active convent, the nuns told her about this very large ancient tree in the middle of like the courtyard area, and that this tree was very special and important to the nuns. They said that there's a tradition. You go up to the tree and ask for the thing that you deeply want, deep in your heart, at the bottom of your heart. I like that phrase, at the bottom of your heart. You ask the tree for the thing that you want deep in your heart, at the bottom of your heart. And so Sue Monk Kidd said she did that. She went up to the tree, and all of a sudden she blurted out, "I want to be a novelist." But she blurted it out before she had ever really become a popular author. I want to, and I wonder for us, if we were to do something similar, what would get blurted out of the deepest part of us? And for some of us, it would be the answer that mirrors who and what we're already doing. But for others of us, it might be an entirely different answer to that question. And to let ourselves be surprised by that. And you may be sitting here, depending upon how many candles you have on your birthday cake, thinking that it might be too late for you to ask that question. But I say, I don't think it's ever too late. Because we're not talking about chronological age of the body. We're talking about the soul, which is timeless. What would your soul blurt out? And perhaps even more importantly than that, do you have the courage to ask the question? In my own life experience, a piece of this happened to me in a very unexpected way. Some of you have heard this story before. This, what I do today and have done now for decades, is not something I ever consciously chose to do. I, like many of you, had been sitting in a Unity church. I was just barely graduated from high school, sitting in a Unity church, gobbling up the message of the minister and trying to have my life work better, which is kind of funny because how bad can your life be just out of high school, right? You haven't lived enough years to have that many really big problems, but be that as it may, there were problems that felt really big to me, a very broken heart. And anyway, sitting in a Unity church and listening to the minister and gobbling up anything that I could to try to make my life be better, have my heart feel better, feel happier. And all of a sudden, I started to have premonitions and visions and then premonitions. Visions that all of a sudden I'd be sitting about where you are, Jeannie, and I'd be looking at the minister, and I'd see me up there, and I'd think, oh, no, you're never getting me up there. First of all, ministers are men. They're old, they're bald, and they wear glasses. Very judgmental, but that's exactly the picture that I had, and that was my minister. I love you, Bob Stevens, you're long since gone. But that was, and so the vision had no choice but to be pushed down. And then I started to have nightmares, that I would wake up in a cold sweat from the nightmare, that I was going to do that thing. I thought, I am not doing that thing. The only class I ever dropped in junior college was speech, when I knew 2 weeks later I had to give a 2-minute talk. I thought, I'm not doing that. Who the heck signs up for a speech class? Not knowing they're going to have to get in front of the group and at least talk a little bit, right? But that was not, I know, really strange stuff. But when the soul has something it's meant to do, it's as if it's not going to let you go. I didn't need to be out at a tree. I was too young. I hadn't lived long enough to really blurt out what it was that I wanted to do or was meant to do. And I share that just because sometimes we can be very surprised by what's really at the deepest core of us, the deepest heart of us. And to pay attention to it is a really important gift that we give to ourselves. I'll build on this a little bit more as I continue with the talk. Third idea is this: using your personality to serve the soul and to serve your purpose. Using your personality. If you've ever been to a variety of Unity churches across our country or across the world, you will discover that while the teachings are very much the same, the core teachings, the style of the ministry, the style of the minister can be vastly different. There's no one kind of personality that seems to be the same for everyone. But the point is allowing whatever personality you have to be in service to what you are meant to do here. Gary Zukov, who was an author that was very influential to me with his very first book, The Dancing Woolly Masters. He wrote that in 1979. I was still in ministerial school at that time. And his book, The Dancing Woolly Masters, was all about what was then very much the understanding of the new physics and the metaphysics of the new physics, quantum physics in particular. And then about 10 years later, he wrote another book, Seed of the Soul, and that really launched him on a very big stage. And he would write about and talk about the idea of our personality being in service to our soul's work, and that when it is that we step into true, authentic power, and how so many of us and so much of our culture doesn't understand authentic power and is focused much more on external power. And one of his themes is that external power is often about control, it's often fear-based, it's based just in the external five senses, where authentic power is when your personality fully aligns with the loving purpose of your soul. So whatever is your soul's unfolding work to do and to be, your personality doesn't need to change, it just needs to be in service to that. Does that make sense? And then it's the piece of, this is a fourth idea, of making the shift from self to service. From self to service, making the shift from self to service is an important part of living a life that's not wasted. So whatever we are gifted with, and it is my belief that every single one of us is gifted, though differently gifted. Whatever gifts I have are probably not the same composite as the gifts that you have. But you have gifts and I have gifts, and our journey is to discover them and then to use them not only for ourselves, but in service to a good that extends beyond ourselves. If we use them only in service to ourselves, we're going to live a very flat, superficial, empty life. We'll probably get burned out as well. But if we always keep in mind, how can this be in service to the greater good, including me, including those I care about, but in service to the greater good, we're going to feel so much more fulfilled. If we hoard our gifts, it's the same thing as hoarding anything. When we hoard stuff, it accumulates, it takes time, it takes energy, we're disorganized, we can't find anything, stuff doesn't work. If we hoard our gifts, our talents, they stagnate. Nobody likes to be around anything that's stagnated, right? We want to avoid stagnated water. We don't want to be around anything that's stagnated. The only way for there not to be stagnation, I would say, is its opposite, which is what? Circulation. Think about the health of the body. I used to remember some of the statistics. I no longer do. But what what I do remember is learning about how many of the illnesses and aches and pains and physical challenges that human beings experience are a result of some form of stagnation in the body, clogging, stagnation. And that the answer is fluidity. The answer is circulation. Does that make sense? And the same is true of us, whether we're talking about our talents, or whether we're talking about our resources, talking about our time. Service is part of a spiritual practice, really, and a spiritual law. So this idea of a life not wasted. Life not wasted. Say that with me again. A life not wasted. And it doesn't matter if we're in the early part of our life, in the middle part, or we're a little pushing on the older part of our life. There is room for each and every one of us to continue to examine how are we living that precious gift of our life for ourselves, for our family, for the people we care about, but I dare say also for the world as well. I so remember and was so impacted by the work of the late Barbara Marx Hubbard. She and I were very good friends for quite a number of her last years. She was known as a futurist, author of so many books. One of her real teachings had to do with looking at this point in human history and the challenges we see in the world, the big challenges, poverty, war, what we're doing to the planet, as evolutionary drivers for humanity to wake up. But right alongside talking about the evolutionary drivers inviting humanity to wake up, she would speak again and again and again about the importance of each of us giving our unique gifts out into the world, not just for ourselves, but for the benefit of our human family. And so I want to begin to close this with a real invitation to us to get as clear as we possibly can about our why, then our what, and then our how. What is your why? What is your why? As I was thinking about it even more deeply, and I think about this quite often, the essence of my why has not ever really changed, but some of the words I use to describe it do change from time to time. And so as recent as just a few days ago, as I was working on this, I was trying to get my why down to the fewest words I possibly could. And they weren't very exciting words. The what and the how to me are, but the why for me is really about making a positive difference wherever I am. That's what drives for me. Your why may be very different than that, but my why is really about making a positive difference wherever I can, making things better. And I was challenging myself and saying, well, is that really true? And it is, whether it's my fanaticism about how I make a blueberry pie, and it's a really good pie, and making it perfectly symmetrical. It's because I like making things better. Whether it's spending a lot of time on a talk, and still after 45 years, or 46 now, of doing this, still looking at my notes every single day before I stand before you. Why? Because I want to make a difference. I want to improve. Going into ministry, the reason it was so, I think that it had to be pushed down and ignored was because the picture of what it looked like I could not yet relate to. But the what answers the calling. I can't think of any other thing, actually, that I could do. Well, I can think of many other things I could do, but this thing gives so much room and so much variety to be able to live out that desire to make a positive difference in people's lives. And so what I do is I teach everyday spiritual wisdom. That's all I do. And how I do it can change over the years. I don't have to be doing ministry to teach everyday spiritual wisdom, do I? I'm sharing this to kind of piece it together in hopes for you to look and apply the same kind of thinking for yourself. For yourself. So my why is about making a positive difference. How I do it, or what I do, is teaching spiritual principles and practices to help people awaken. And then the how I go about it is through the spoken word. There may be a time that I don't do it this way through the spoken word. Another part of the how is through writing, like the book, like the Just for Today messages. Another way that I go about it is saying yes to serving on the board of Unity World Headquarters that has me leaving 4 times a year and disengaging, but it's part of the how that supports the why. My tithing. John and I still tithe at least 10% of everything we receive back to this ministry. It's a way of living that. Can you see the thread for yourself? Can you? So the why may be very, very basic in some ways. But when you get clear on the why, it becomes much, much easier to then be open-minded and broad about, well, what could that look like? Because it could look like so many, many different things. And that's what's exciting. And then the how that you get to do the what can be very varied. And so even though you may be moving toward retirement, if you know what your why is, you will be able to weave that as a beautiful golden thread continuously through whatever you do and however you do it. Does that make sense? No life wasted. You have a precious gift. Continue to use it for yourself and for the betterment of the world we share together. Namaste.